teachings, practices, interpretations, and opinions presented in this series reflect the traditions and perspectives of the Temple of the Two Guides and the Church of Thessaly exclusively. They are not presented as universal to all forms of Hellenic, Hellenistic, Neoplatonic, pagan, polytheist, occult, or theurgical practice. Ancient traditions were historically diverse, and modern practitioners likewise hold a wide range of beliefs, customs, and interpretations. This series is intended as a presentation of our own temple tradition, philosophy, and religious practice.
Before we begin, it's important to explain why we'll be moving back and forth between Hesiod's Theogony and Apollodorus's library. Although both works preserve Greek mythology, they serve different purposes. Hesiod is primarily concerned with theology. His goal is to explain the origins of the cosmos, the emergence of divine order, and the deeper meaning behind the succession of the gods. Because of this, he often moves quickly through events, focusing on principles rather than narrative details. Apollodorus serves a different function. Writing centuries later, he gathered and organized many mythological traditions into a more systematic account. His library often provides details, genealogies, and episodes that Hesiod either assumes his audience already knows or chooses not to discuss. For students of Greek religion, these works are not competitors. They are companions. Hesiod gives us theology. Apollodorus gives us narrative continuity. Together, they provide a fuller understanding of both the myths themselves and the ideas they express. This also reflects an important Thessalian principle. Ancient religion was never built upon a single text. The Greeks preserved many traditions, many voices, and many interpretations. To study Greek religion properly is to listen to those voices together. As we move into the reign of Kronos, the birth of Zeus, and the rise of the Olympians, we will rely more heavily upon Apollodorus for the narrative, while continuing to interpret these myths through the theological lens Hesiod has provided. The story now moves from the fall of Ouranos to the reign of Kronos, from the Titans to the Olympians, and from the problem of succession to the search for a truly harmonious cosmic order.
And having dethroned their father, they, the Titans, brought up their brethren who had been hurled down to Tartarus, and committed the sovereignty to Kronos.
Now that the revolt against Ouranos has come to an end, we arrive at an important transition in the story. At first glance, it might appear that the myth is simply describing the overthrow of one ruler and the rise of another. But the text is actually doing something much more sophisticated. The dethronement of Ouranos is not presented as an isolated act of violence. It is presented as part of a larger process of correction and restoration. One detail that is easy to overlook is that the Titans do not merely seize power for themselves. They also release their brethren who had been imprisoned and cast into Tartarus. This is an important theological point. The myth is teaching us that genuine correction must address both the oppressor and the oppressed. It is not enough to remove a tyrant. A new authority must also concern itself with those who suffered under the previous regime. From a Thessalian perspective, this is one of the distinctions between correction and chaos. Chaos destroys, correction restores. The Titans demonstrate at least an initial recognition of this principle by freeing those who had been hidden away and denied their proper place within the cosmos. The symbolism is powerful. For generations, the cosmos had been constricted. Potential had been buried. Entire orders of beings had been denied lawful emergence. Now, for the first time, the cosmos is allowed to breathe again. This leads us to one of the fundamental doctrines of Thessalian theology. Justice precedes stability. A new order cannot establish itself securely while unresolved wrongs remain buried beneath it. Liberation is not merely an act of compassion. It is a structural necessity. The cosmos cannot move forward until what has been unjustly concealed is brought back into the light. This is why the Titans' release of their imprisoned brethren matters so much. It acknowledges that power gained without restitution remains stained by the injustices of the past. But even here, the myth immediately introduces a complication. Once the revolt has succeeded, sovereignty is entrusted to Kronos. This marks the transition from collective rebellion to centralized authority. And here we encounter one of the most important lessons in the entire theogony. Kronos becomes king not because he embodies wisdom or harmony. He becomes king because he acted when everyone else remained silent. His authority is based upon decisive action. He disrupted the old order when others would not. This establishes a recurring pattern that we will see throughout the mythology. Power often passes first to those capable of disruption before it passes to those capable of integration. The person who can overthrow a broken system is not always the same person who can build a harmonious one. Kronos succeeds in ending the immediate oppression of Ouranos. He frees the imprisoned brethren. He breaks the stagnation that had dominated the cosmos. But he does not solve the deeper problem. The deeper problem is fear. More specifically, it is fear of succession. Ouranos feared being replaced. And although Kronos defeats him, he never truly overcomes that same fear within himself. The Titans end tyranny, but they do not transcend it. This is why the myth prepares us for what comes later. When Kronos eventually learns that one of his own children will replace him, he responds in exactly the same way his father did. Not because he is identical to Ouranos, but because the underlying fear remains unresolved. This is one of the great theological insights of the story. Liberation does not automatically produce wisdom. Removing an oppressor does not automatically transform the hearts of those who inherit power. If authority has not been transformed inwardly, it will often recreate the very patterns it once opposed. This is why the passage functions as an important warning against confusing success with completion. The Titans succeed. They overthrow injustice. They free the imprisoned. They establish a new regime. Yet their victory remains incomplete. Their order is provisional. From a Thessalian perspective, true sovereignty requires more than power. It requires the integration of power, justice, memory, reverence, and wisdom. Kronos inherits a cosmos already marked by violence, fear, and unresolved consequences. His reign may appear stable, but that stability rests upon foundations that have not yet been healed. This carries important implications for sacred leadership. Every generation experiences reform movements. Institutions change. Communities restructure themselves. Old injustices are corrected. These things are often necessary and good. But reform itself is not the final goal. A movement may correct genuine wrongs while still carrying within it the seeds of future failure. The task of the sacred leader is therefore larger than liberation alone. The sacred leader must also heal the underlying fear that causes authority to cling to power in the first place. Until that fear is addressed, succession remains tragic rather than harmonious. This brings us to the final lesson of the passage. Although the tyrant has been overthrown, although the imprisoned brethren have been released, and although a new sovereign now sits upon the throne, the deepest theological question remains unanswered. How can authority yield without violence? How can succession occur without fear? How can power be transferred without producing another cycle of repression? The myth has not yet solved these problems. It has only prepared the ground for their eventual solution. The Titans' victory is necessary, but it is not complete. It clears away what stood in the way of growth. It creates space for a higher order to emerge, but it does not yet establish that order. For that reason, the cosmos now exists in a state of provisional harmony. It is freer than before. It is more open than before, but it is still bound by fear. And that fear will continue to shape events until a new ruler emerges who can reconcile authority and succession rather than forcing them into conflict. That ruler will be Zeus. Under Zeus, the question will no longer be how to overthrow authority. The question will become how authority can coexist with justice, wisdom, memory, and lawful succession.
Rhea, overpowered by Kronos, bore him splendid children, Hestia, Demeter, and golden-sandaled Hera, and powerful Hades, who dwells in mansions beneath the earth, and has a pitiless heart, and the loud-sounding earth-shaker, Poseidon, and the counselor Zeus, the father of the gods and of men, by whose thunder the broad earth is shaken. Great Kronos would swallow this down, as each one came from his mother's holy womb to her knees, mindful lest anyone else of Ouranos' illustrious children should have the honor of kingship among the immortals. For he had heard from Gaia and Ouranos that, mighty though he was destined to be overpowered by a child of his, through the plans of great Zeus. For this reason, then, he held no unseeing watch, but observed closely, and swallowed down his children. An unremitting grief gripped Rhea.
As we continue the story, we encounter a new stage in the crisis of divine authority. What makes this episode so important is that Kronos is not acting out of ignorance. In fact, the opposite is true. Both Gaia and Ouranos have already warned him that one of his own children will someday overthrow him. He knows exactly what happened to his father, and he understands the law of succession that governs the cosmos. Yet that understanding does not produce wisdom. It produces fear. This is one of the most profound lessons in the myth. Knowledge by itself is not enough. A person can understand reality perfectly and still refuse to accept it. Kronos knows that succession is inevitable. He knows that every generation gives way to another. He knows that authority is not meant to remain fixed forever. But instead of accepting this truth, he begins looking for a way around it. He attempts to outmaneuver the very structure of reality itself. This marks an important shift from the failure of Ouranos. Ouranos acted through denial. He refused to acknowledge what had been born. He hid his children away and attempted to prevent their emergence. Kronos takes a different path. He acknowledges the threat completely. He sees it clearly. Yet because he sees it clearly, he becomes obsessed with controlling it. In many ways, this makes his condition even more dangerous. Foreknowledge without acceptance often produces hypervigilance. The more we know about a feared future, the more tempted we become to control every variable surrounding it. So it can be deduced that foreknowledge often intensifies control. Kronos becomes watchful, suspicious, and constantly alert. Yet the text also suggests that he becomes, in another sense, blinded or unseeing. Not because he lacks perception, but because his fear narrows his perception. When fear dominates the mind, everything begins to look like a threat. The future stops being a source of possibility and becomes an enemy. Kronos sees danger everywhere, because danger is all he's looking for. This brings us to the most shocking aspect of the story. Ouranos attempted to stop succession through enclosure. Kronos attempts to stop succession through consumption. This is not simply a different strategy, it represents a deeper level of corruption. Ouranos hid what he feared. Kronos devours what he fears. The symbolism here is extremely important. Enclosure prevents emergence. Consumption seeks to eliminate emergence altogether. Kronos does not swallow his children because he is hungry. He swallows them because he is terrified. Each child represents the future. Each child represents succession. Each child represents the continuation of the cosmic order beyond himself. And because he fears replacement, he attempts to destroy the future before it can arrive. From a theological perspective, Kronos is now at war with time itself. He is trying to halt the movement of reality. He is attempting to prevent tomorrow from ever arriving. This is why the myth becomes so powerful on a symbolic level. Kronos transforms kingship into anti-generation. Instead of nurturing the future, he consumes it. Instead of preparing successors, he erases them. Instead of creating continuity, he attempts to create permanence. But permanence is not the same thing as order, and the cosmos does not permit permanence where succession is required. The tragedy here is that this act does not solve his problem. It merely postpones it. Each child he swallows delays the future for a moment, but every act of delay increases the pressure building beneath the surface. The more aggressively he attempts to stop succession, the more inevitable succession becomes. This is why tyrannical systems often accelerate their own collapse. The harder they cling to power, the greater the forces that eventually arise against them. Fear is never satisfied. Every concession to fear demands another, and another, and another. Kronos cannot swallow enough children to make himself safe because safety is not the problem. His relationship to the future is the problem. The story also asks us to pay attention to Rhea. Just as Gaia suffered under Ouranos, Rhea now suffers under Kronos. She becomes the hidden victim of his fear. Again, we see the generative principle being forced to participate in its own negation. Rhea brings forth life, but that life is immediately erased. She becomes a mother whose children disappear the moment they are born. From a Thessalian perspective, this reveals the true cost of tyranny. Tyranny doesn't just harm those who are directly oppressed. It damages the very sources of vitality and renewal. It turns the forces of generation against themselves. Communities experience this. Institutions experience this. Traditions experience this. Whenever leaders become incapable of accepting renewal, the structures that produce renewal begin to suffer. The people tasked with creating the future are forced to watch that future being consumed. Yet the myth also teaches that grief itself becomes a source of transformation. Rhea's sorrow is not passive. Her suffering gradually prepares the conditions for resistance. Just as Gaia eventually sought a way to correct the actions of Ouranos, Rhea's pain will eventually lead her to seek another path as well. The cosmos continues to teach the same lesson. Suppression does not eliminate succession, it drives it underground. What cannot emerge openly begins developing in secret, and when it finally returns, it often returns with even greater force. This is why the Thessalian theology identifies as a recurring law within the mythology, that rulers who fear replacement attempt to halt time, and in doing so, they hasten their own downfall. It is worth noting that the earliest Greek myths do not explicitly identify Kronos as time itself. That association develops later. However, it is easy to see why later philosophers made the connection. Kronos behaves exactly like time that consumes its own future. He attempts to devour tomorrow in order to preserve today. He seeks immortality through stasis. He wants existence without change, order without succession, authority without replacement. But these things are impossible. The cosmos is built upon emergence. The future cannot be eliminated. It can only be delayed. This is why Kronos becomes such a powerful symbol. He represents the tragedy of intelligence separated from trust. He understands reality, yet he cannot accept reality. He knows the law of succession, yet he fights against it. He possesses knowledge, but lacks reverence for the order that knowledge reveals. For future priests and leaders, the lesson is enduring. Authority rooted in fear eventually becomes cannibalistic. It begins consuming the very people, traditions, and institutions that are meant to carry it forward. We see this pattern not only in mythology, but throughout history. Leaders who silence successors, organizations that refuse mentorship, institutions that confuse continuity with control. All of these repeat the logic of Kronos. The myth does not condemn power. Power is necessary. The myth condemns power that refuses to share itself, power that seeks immortality through stagnation, power that attempts to conquer time rather than participate in it. And that is ultimately Kronos' failure. His failure is not that he rules. His failure is that he rules against the future. the cosmos moves toward renewal. Kronos attempts to stop that movement, and because he does, the very future he fears is already beginning to gather strength beyond his sight.
But when she was about to bear Zeus, the father of gods and of men, she beseeched her own parents, Gaia and Ouranos, to contrive some scheme so that she could bear her dear son without being noticed, and take retribution for the avenging deities of her father and of her children, whom great crooked counsel Kronos had swallowed down. They listened well to their dear daughter and obeyed her, and they revealed to her everything that was fated to come about concerning Kronos, the king, and his strong-spirited son. They told her to go to Lyctus, to the rich land of Crete, when she was about to bear the youngest of her children, great Zeus, and Gaia received him in broad Crete to nurse him and rear him up. There she came first to Lyctus, carrying him through the swift black night. Taking him in her hands, she concealed him in a deep cave, under the hidden places of the holy earth, in the Aegean mountain, abounding with forests. And she wrapped a great stone in swaddling clothes, and put it into the hand of Ouranos' son, the great ruler, the king of the earlier gods. He seized this with his hands, and put it down into his belly, cruel one, nor did he know in his spirit that in place of the stone his son remained hereafter, unconquered and untroubled, who would overpower him with force and his own hands, and would soon drive him out from his honor and be king among the immortals.
As we continue the story of Kronos, we arrive at one of the most important turning points in the entire mythology. At first glance, this episode appears to be a simple story of deception. Rhea tricks Kronos by hiding the newborn Zeus away in a cave and substituting a swaddled stone in his place, ensuring that the future king of the gods survives. But from a theological perspective, the passage is concerned with something much deeper. The real question is not why Rhea deceives Kronos. The real question is why deception becomes necessary at all. To understand that, we have to remember what Kronos has become. Kronos is no longer simply a ruler. He has become a ruler who consumes his own future. Every child born to Rhea is swallowed immediately. Every possibility of succession is erased before it can develop. Every lawful path through which continuity might occur has been blocked. This is why Thessalian theology does not treat Rhea's deception as a moral failure. She is not deceiving Kronos out of ambition. She is not plotting to seize power for herself. She is trying to preserve life itself. And that distinction is important. As in the previous myth of Ouranos, we see here again that deception appears in the cosmos only after transparency has already been destroyed. When authority becomes governed by fear, honest succession becomes impossible. When power treats emergence as a threat, truth can no longer move openly through the system. The future must find another path. This is one of the sobering lessons of the story. When authority consumes its successors, deception becomes structurally inevitable, not because deception is ideal, but because it has become the last remaining means through which continuity can survive. In other words, Rhea's deception is not attacking order, it is preserving the possibility of a future order. Notice also where Rhea turns for help. She does not organize a rebellion or gather allies. She appeals to Gaia and Ouranos. This detail is easy to miss, but it is profoundly important. Rhea turns to her ancestry. She turns to the deeper foundations of the cosmos itself, and their response reveals an important theological principle. Fate is not opposed to succession. Succession is one of the ways fate fulfills itself. The problem is not destiny, the problem is resistance to destiny. Because Kronos has blocked every lawful path by which succession can occur, stratagem becomes necessary. Deception becomes the final channel through which destiny can pass. The cosmos adapts because authority has made honesty impossible. This brings us to the concealment of Zeus, and here we encounter another important distinction. Earlier in the mythology, Ouranos concealed his children. Now Zeus is concealed as well. At first, these situations may seem similar, but in reality they are complete opposites. Ouranos hid his children in order to prevent their emergence. Rhea hides Zeus in order to protect his emergence. One concealment is repression, the other is preservation. One seeks erasure, the other seeks maturation. This is why Thessalian teaching emphasizes that concealment is not inherently good or bad. Its meaning depends upon its purpose, or, as our church motto say, the end depends upon the beginning. Zeus is not hidden so that he may disappear. He is hidden so that he may grow. The cave in Crete therefore functions as a sacred space of transition. It isn't a prison or a tomb. It is a womb. It is a place where the future can mature beyond the reach of a system that seeks to destroy it. Outside the reach of Kronos, Zeus grows naturally, and Gaia's role as nurse and rearer reinforces another important lesson. Generative power naturally prepares what it creates for rightful succession. When it is no longer coerced by fear, life tends toward growth. The cosmos tends toward continuity. The future tends toward emergence. The next detail may seem almost humorous, but it contains profound symbolism. Rhea presents Kronos with a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes, and Kronos swallows it without question. The stone becomes one of the most revealing symbols in the entire myth. From a theological perspective, the stone represents the illusion of permanence. Kronos believes he has secured his throne. He believes he has preserved control. He feels the weight of what he has swallowed and mistakes that weight for security. But the thing he possesses is not continuity. It is only mass. It is not life. It is only matter. This is why the stone exposes Kronos' blindness. He can no longer distinguish between living succession and inert possession. He mistakes control for stability. He mistakes ownership for safety. He mistakes fullness for permanence. And because fear has replaced discernment, he never questions what he has consumed. The deception succeeds not because it is extraordinarily clever. It succeeds because tyranny is fundamentally fragile. Systems built upon fear become dependent upon appearances. They stop looking deeply. They stop listening. They stop discerning. Surface verification replaces wisdom. And once that happens, deception becomes remarkably easy. The tyrant becomes vulnerable precisely because fear has narrowed perception. The myth, therefore, reveals a profound irony. The ruler who seeks total control becomes easier to deceive than the ruler who trusts the order of reality. As the passage concludes, we are reminded that Zeus remains unconquered and untroubled. This is a crucial theological point. Fate has not been defeated, it has only been delayed. In fact, deception itself does not overthrow Kronos. It merely ensures that fate survives long enough to unfold. The cosmos does not need force at this moment. It needs preservation. Destiny requires only one thing: survival. As long as Zeus lives, the future remains possible. This completes a pattern that began all the way back with Ouranos. First came repression. Repression produced revolt. Revolt produced fear. Fear produced consumption. Consumption produced deception. And now deception preserves succession. At every stage, authority has become more resistant to yielding, and at every stage the cosmos has become more subtle in ensuring continuity. What is especially important is that Zeus will eventually accomplish what neither Ouranos nor Kronos could. He will not remain hidden forever. He will not rely permanently upon deception. He will eventually emerge openly, not as a frightened child, not as a secret survivor, but as a mature ruler capable of confronting Kronos directly. The future is not being preserved so that it can remain concealed. It is being preserved so that it can eventually appear in the light. For future priests and leaders, the lesson is unmistakable. Authority that cannot tolerate succession will eventually be outlived by it. Truth may retreat, but it does not disappear. Wisdom may be driven underground, but it continues to grow. The future may be hidden for a time, but it cannot be erased. When open continuity is blocked, life finds another path. When lawful succession is denied, destiny works quietly beneath the surface. And eventually, what has been nurtured in secret emerges with greater strength than before. This is the tragedy of Kronos. He was not destroyed because others deceived him. He was deceived because, like his father Ouranos, he made deception the only remaining path through which order could survive. And while he sits upon the throne believing himself secure, the child who will transform the cosmos is already growing beyond his reach. And so we arrive at the end of another chapter in the unfolding order of the cosmos. What began with the repression of Ouranos has now carried us through revolt, fear, consumption, and deception. At every stage, authority has resisted yielding, and at every stage, the cosmos has found another way to preserve continuity. The lesson is not simply that Kronos is a tyrant. The lesson is that fear transforms power. When authority becomes afraid of succession, it begins to turn against the very future it was meant to protect. It stops listening. It stops trusting. It stops participating in the natural movement of life. And in doing so, it creates the conditions for its own downfall. Yet the myth also teaches something hopeful. The future cannot be erased. Truth may retreat, but it does not disappear. Wisdom may be hidden, but it continues to grow. What is nurtured in secret eventually emerges into the light. This is why Zeus matters. Zeus is more than the next ruler in a sequence of rulers. He is the answer to a question the cosmos has been asking since the beginning. Can authority exist without repression? Can succession occur without fear? Can power and continuity be reconciled? The reign of Kronos has shown us what happens when authority attempts to rule against the future. The story of Zeus will begin to show us what becomes possible when authority learns to work with it instead. In our next lesson, we will follow the hidden child of Crete as destiny begins to move openly once again. The future has survived, the heir has been preserved, and the age of Zeus is drawing near.